May 27, 1905. Dawn breaks over the cold waters of the Tsushima Strait. Steel hulls slice through gray waves. On the horizon, smokestacks rise like dark pillars against the sky. In a matter of hours, the fate of empires will be decided by roaring engines, massive guns, and walls of steel. By sunset, one fleet will lie shattered beneath the sea, and the world will never look at Japan the same way again. This is the story of the Battle of Tsushima, the day modern naval warfare announced its arrival in thunder and flame. At the turn of the 20th century, two empires stood on a collision course. The Russian Empire, ruled by Tsar Nicholas II, was vast, proud, and determined to secure a warm water port in the Pacific. Across the sea, Japan, newly industrialized and fiercely ambitious, had transformed itself since the Meiji Restoration. It sought recognition, security, and dominance in East Asia, becoming a modern military power. The flashpoint was Korea and Manchuria. Both Russia and Japan saw the region as vital to their futures. Russia's expansion into Manchuria and its growing presence at Port Arthur alarmed Tokyo. Diplomatic negotiations faltered. In February 1904, Japan launched a surprise torpedo attack on the Russian fleet anchored at Port Arthur. The Russo-Japanese War had begun. On land, brutal fighting raged across Manchuria. At sea, Japan steadily tightened its grip, blockading Russian forces and securing control of regional waters. Port Arthur eventually fell. Russia's Pacific Squadron was crippled, but the Tsar refused to concede. In a desperate gamble, he ordered the Baltic Fleet to sail halfway around the world to relieve the trapped forces. It was an epic voyage of nearly 18,000 nautical miles, challenging Japanese naval dominance. The fleet, commanded by Admiral Zinoviy Rozhestvinsky, departed in October 1904. These were modern steel battleships, bristling with heavy guns, supported by cruisers and destroyers. But the journey was plagued with tension and error. Early on, nervous Russian crews opened fire on British fishing vessels in the North Sea, the Dogger Bank incident. The diplomatic fallout nearly drew Britain into the war. Morale suffered. Supplies ran thin. Months at sea exhausted both ships and men. By May 1905, the battered Baltic Fleet approached the waters between Korea and Japan, the Tsushima Strait. Waiting for them was Admiral Tōgō Hihikiro and the Imperial Japanese Navy. Japan's fleet was smaller in tonnage but better trained, faster, and battle-hardened. Its ships had been tested throughout the war. Gunnery drills were rigorous. Command structures were efficient. Morale was high. On the afternoon of May 27th, Japanese scouts sighted the Russian fleet. Tōgō made a bold move. He maneuvered his ships to cross the Russian line of advance, a tactic known as crossing the T. It allowed Japanese battleships to unleash full broadsides while the Russians could respond with only their forward guns. At 2:10 p.m., the first shots thundered across the sea. Shells screamed through the air. Within minutes, towering plumes of water and fire engulfed the Russian flagship, Knyaz Suvorov. Japanese gunners, trained to fire rapidly and accurately, found their mark again and again. Their shells carried high explosive charges that ripped through steel and ignited infernos. The Russian fleet struggled to respond. Months at sea had dulled their efficiency. Many crews were inexperienced. Coordination faltered. Signals were misunderstood. As flagship after flagship was damaged or destroyed, command broke down. By nightfall, chaos reigned. Japanese destroyers and torpedo boats launched relentless attacks under cover of darkness. One Russian battleship after another succumbed, capsizing, exploding, or slipping beneath the waves. When the sun rose on May 28th, the scale of devastation was staggering. Of the 38 Russian ships that entered the strait, 21 had been sunk. 7 more were captured. Only a handful escaped. Over 5,000 Russian sailors were dead. Thousands more were taken prisoner. Japan lost just 3 torpedo boats. It was not merely a victory. It was annihilation. Admiral Rozhestvinsky, wounded and captured, could do nothing but watch as the dream of Russian naval power dissolved. The human cost was immense. Young sailors had endured months of hardship only to face overwhelming destruction. Letters home would never be answered. Families across Russia mourned sons lost in distant waters. For Japan, the victory came at a price too. Men burned, drowned, and shattered by steel. Yet their sacrifice cemented a new national identity. The global shockwaves were immediate. For the first time, an Asian power had decisively defeated a major European empire. The myth of Western invincibility was shattered. Across colonized Asia, observers took note. Japan became a symbol of possibility, a nation that had modernized, resisted domination, and prevailed. In Russia, humiliation turned to unrest. The defeat at Tsushima compounded disasters on land. Public confidence in the Tsarist regime eroded rapidly. The revolution of 1905 erupted, forcing Tsar Nicholas II to concede reforms. Militarily, Tsushima marked the dawn of a new naval era. The battle demonstrated the decisive power of long-range gunnery, speed, and communication. Observers around the world studied every detail. Just 1 year later, Britain would launch HMS Dreadnought, rendering older battleships obsolete and igniting a global naval arms race. Steel had replaced wood. Industrial might have become inseparable from military power. The oceans were no longer dominated by tradition alone, but by technology, training, and tactical innovation. The Battle of Tsushima was more than a clash of fleets. It was a turning point in world history. For Japan, it marked its arrival as a great power. Within 5 years, it would formally annex Korea. Its influence would expand across East Asia. The confidence born in those waters would shape its ambitions for decades to come. For Russia, it was a warning ignored. The empire staggered forward, wounded and unstable, until the greater catastrophe of 1917 swept it away. And for the world, Tsushima was a glimpse of the future. The 20th century would be defined by industrialized warfare. The thunder of guns in the Tsushima Strait was an overture to the even greater storms of World War I. As the wrecks settled into the deep and the smoke drifted from the sea, a new balance of power emerged. The age of wooden ships and colonial certainty was over. In its place rose a harsher reality, where nations rose and fell by their mastery of modern war. In the quiet that followed the battle, the waters of Tsushima seemed unchanged. Waves rolled gently. The horizon stretched empty and calm. But beneath that calm lay twisted steel and silent graves. And above it, a world forever altered.